Smack. The sound of the slap cracked through first class like lightning in a library. The kind of sound that shouldn't exist up here, not among warm towels and whispered wine orders, not between designer suits, silk scarves, and $4,000 tickets. Passengers looked up. Forks paused midair. Laptops froze on half-written emails. A few people flinched. One man pulled off his headphones. Another woman blinked twice, as if her eyes had lied, but they hadn't. Because there she was, a black girl no older than 13, sitting alone in seat 2A, back straight, hands in her lap, silent, a red handprint blooming across her left cheek. The flight attendant loomed above her, blonde hair, crisp uniform, white gloves, and a voice sharp as a knife. "This is first class," Candace hissed, loud enough for the cabin to hear. "We don't tolerate disrespectful children up here." And just like that, the hush in the cabin turned thick. No one said a word. But what Candace Rourke didn't know, and would soon regret, was that the silent girl she just slapped was carrying the override key to a system that would, in 5 minutes, freeze $2, $3 billion in funding, and bring 71 flights to a halt across the country. Tell us where you're watching from, and what you'd do if you saw this happen at 35,000 feet. 3 hours earlier, JFK International Airport. Eden Monroe walked like she moved through water. Slow, soft steps, shoulders hunched, eyes never quite meeting anyone's. She wasn't shy. She wasn't rude. She just didn't talk unless she had to. Too many words in the air always felt sharp, like pebbles hitting glass. Her mother used to say, Eden heard the world differently. Now, her mother was gone, but the echoes remained. She clutched her old silver locket in one hand, the one thing left that still smelled faintly of her. And in her backpack, tucked carefully under a book of maps, lay a small tablet loaded with one silent system, a system only she could access. Aunt Denise leaned down and kissed the top of Eden's head. "You're in 2A, baby. I'll be in economy just a few rows behind," she said softly. "You know what to do if anything feels wrong." Eden nodded once. Her fingers tapped the side of the locket. 4 short taps, too long, like a rhythm her mom used to drum on the table while coding. "Good." Denise smiled. "Just breathe. Just be you. I'll check in soon." Eden stepped into the first-class cabin alone. It was quiet, cool, organized, exactly how she liked it. A woman, older, blonde, tight smile, greeted her at the front. "Traveling alone?" Candace asked. "Already reaching for the boarding pass." Eden nodded. "Speak up, sweetheart." Eden just blinked. Candace raised a brow. "Okay then." Minutes passed. Passengers settled. The cabin door closed. Eden looked out the window, watching the rain draw slow rivers on the glass. Her headphones muffled the noise of takeoff. She liked the pressure in her chest. It felt grounding. She didn't eat much breakfast. Nerves, mostly, and memories. This was her first flight since the accident, since Mom, but she didn't let her face show it. An hour in, her throat was dry. She pressed the call button. No one came. She waited, pressed again. Still nothing. 10 minutes later, when Candace finally passed by, Eden tugged lightly on her sleeve. "Water, please," she whispered. Candace turned, looked her up and down. "We haven't started service yet," she said coldly. "Be patient," and walked away. Lunch came. Trays rolled. Eden waited. Row 1, row 2, skip. Row 3. Her stomach tightened. The man across the aisle glanced over. "Excuse me," he said to Candace. "I think you missed this, young lady." Candace smiled. "Too polished. Special meal." Her guardian requested it be delayed. Lies. Eden said nothing. She learned early. Sometimes silence was safer than asking again. Later, she tried to adjust her tray table. It stuck. Candace was already there, grabbing it from the other side. Their hands brushed. That was all. But Candace flinched, and her face twisted. "Don't touch things when I'm working," she snapped. Eden shrank back, and that was when it happened. Smack. A sound so sharp, it made even the hum of the jet engines go quiet. Eden's body jerked. Her cheek burned. She didn't cry, didn't move, didn't even look at Candace. She just stopped. Candace's voice dropped low. "Maybe now you'll learn some respect." Someone coughed nearby. A fork clinked against porcelain. But still, No one intervened. Eden reached slowly into her jacket pocket. Not for protection, not for a phone. For the locket. She opened it. Pressed her thumb to the hidden sensor inside. Click. Her tablet lit up under the tray. NeuroAir core. Emergency override detected. Passenger verified. Eden Monroe. Activate red level ethics flag. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. If someone ever crosses the line, and no one's there to stop it, you don't need to yell. Just tap. The system will listen for you. Eden tapped once. The screen blinked. Override confirmed. 5 minutes later. 300 miles away. A red light started blinking on the FAA's ethics dashboard. Then, another and another. An operator looked up. We've got a level 3 NeuroAir ethics flag. Active override. First class cabin. Passenger ID. Eden Monroe. The room fell silent. A senior engineer stood. Monroe, as in Dr. Ariel Monroe's daughter. And just like that, 71 flights were flagged for compliance hold. $3 billion in AI funding was suspended, and the girl in 2A, silent, still, and invisible to most, had just forced an entire industry to pay attention. Eden didn't look at Candace. Didn't need to, because the sky was listening now, and her silence was louder than anything Candace Rourke could scream. The chill from the airplane vent above Eden's seat was starting to sink into her skin. Her cheek still stung from the slap, but that wasn't what made her hands tremble. It was the way Candace had looked at her, like she wasn't a person, like she wasn't supposed to be there. Eden had been ignored before, dismissed, overlooked, but never struck. And not like that. Not in public, not in first class, not in the exact kind of space her mother spent her life trying to make safer. She stared down at the tablet tucked under her tray table, now glowing a soft blue. The words were still there. Emergency override activated. Ethics violation flag level 3 confirmed. It didn't feel real. The plane hummed along as if nothing had happened. But Eden knew something big, and it started with a slap. 6 months earlier, the hospital room had smelled like metal and lavender. Machines beeped in rhythms Eden couldn't understand. Her mother, Dr. Ariel Monroe, lay motionless, her chest rising in slow, mechanical waves. She hadn't woken up since the crash. Eden remembered holding her mother's hand, whispering things she couldn't say out loud to anyone else. Her mother was her favorite person, her safe place, her voice when she didn't have one. That night, Aunt Denise sat beside her, red-eyed but strong, and in a voice barely above a breath, she said, "Your mom left you something, not just memories." She handed Eden a thin silver locket. Inside wasn't a photo, but a sensor, a biometric pad, cold and precise. She said, "If anyone ever treated you like you didn't matter, and no one listened, the system she built would." Back in the present, Eden touched the locket now hanging beneath her shirt. Her hand hovered there, hidden from view. She didn't know exactly what the override would do. Her mom never said. She only said it was connected to the NeuroAir core, the new ethics system being tested by 6 major airlines. Her mom had fought hard to get it into trials, but she died before it could be implemented. Eden wasn't supposed to use it unless something crossed the line. And now, the line had been crossed. Candace hadn't returned since the slap. Another attendant had come through with drinks, avoiding Eden's row entirely. But the businessman across the aisle kept glancing at her. His brow was furrowed. His laptop was closed. His eyes were alert now. She could tell he knew something had happened, but he said nothing, just like everyone else. Eden's headphones were still on. Though the battery had long since died, she liked the muffled quiet they gave her, like a blanket around her brain. She pulled Kismet, her stuffed rabbit, from her tote and hugged it close, the way she used to do when she'd sit in her mom's lab while she coded. She remembered the hum of the screens, the click of a keyboard, her mother's fingers moving fast, her voice soft, explaining what she was building even when Eden couldn't fully follow. "This isn't just for adults, baby. This system's for kids like you, too." For anyone who's ever been misunderstood or made to feel small. Her mother had always believed silence wasn't weakness. It was a different kind of language, one that most people just didn't understand yet. The first time someone told Eden she was weird, she'd cried for hours. The second time, she stayed quiet. The third, she stopped reacting altogether. Her mom saw it. She never tried to fix Eden. She tried to fix the world around her. And now the world was starting to feel broken again. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the speaker. "This is your captain speaking. We're cruising at 36,000 feet. Weather ahead looks smooth. We'll begin our descent into Copenhagen in approximately 5 hours. Thank you for flying with us." Eden didn't move. But she heard footsteps approaching. Not heavy ones like Candace's. Lighter, quieter. A new flight attendant appeared beside her seat. A younger man, maybe mid-30s. Dark-skinned, gentle eyes. His name tag read J. Walker. "Hi there," he said softly, crouching beside her so he wasn't towering. "Just wanted to check if you're doing okay." Eden didn't answer, but her eyes flicked to him. He didn't push. He saw the empty tray, the untouched water, the red mark still faint on her cheek. His eyes tightened, just a little. "I'm gonna get you something warm." "All right," he said. "Something sweet." She nodded once. When he returned with hot cocoa and a small snack, he placed them gently on her tray. No fuss, no noise. "Then," he whispered, "you don't have to say anything. Just know someone sees you." And for the first time since boarding, Eden felt something other than fear. She felt seen. In the cockpit, meanwhile, a message had just come through. An encrypted ping to the captain's console, FAA priority code. Captain Reynolds leaned forward, his fingers hovering over the screen. Passenger ID, Eden Monroe. Emergency override access holder. Ethics flag level 3 active. Prepare for external review upon landing. He stared, then glanced at the seating chart. 2A. The name clicked, Monroe. Dr. Ariel Monroe. His hands tightened on the yoke. He pressed the intercom button and called for the head purser. In first class, Candace appeared again. Her expression was different now. Not smug, not superior. Just confused. She paused halfway down the aisle, her eyes darting toward Eden's seat. She looked toward the galley where Walker stood speaking to the purser. Candace stiffened. She turned abruptly and disappeared behind the curtain. Eden didn't see any of that. She was too busy watching the clouds outside, soft and white like foam. In her lap, her fingers hovered over the tablet screen. It now showed a new line of text. FAA compliance review in progress. NeuroAir protocol pending activation. And below it, a quiet message only she would understand. Thank you for listening, Eden. Now they have to listen, too. The cabin had settled into that quiet, high-altitude rhythm. People dozed with masks over their eyes. Soft clinks came from the galley where coffee was being poured. The lights were dimmed just enough to mimic dusk. But Eden didn't feel sleepy. She sat upright in her seat, the blanket J. Walker gave her tucked neatly around her knees. Her cup of hot cocoa, still warm, sat untouched on the tray. Her headphones were back on, though they weren't connected to anything. They were like armor, just enough to say, "Please don't talk to me," without saying a word. From behind the curtain, Candace peeked. She hadn't come near Eden since the slap, and she hadn't received any formal reprimand yet. No angry captain. No FA call. No confrontation. But something in the air had shifted. Walker, that other attendant, had been watching her. The man in 2C kept glancing her way. Even the purser looked more cautious than usual. Candace's stomach was tight. She'd seen this before. The slow build of pressure. She was good at avoiding consequences. She knew how to smile through situations and file them away. But this, something about that girl, it bothered her. She didn't move like other kids. Didn't talk. Didn't even cry when she was slapped. What kind of child doesn't cry? Candace crossed her arms, watching the back of Eden's head like it might reveal something. Eden hadn't moved in nearly 30 minutes, but her mind was racing. The cocoa smelled sweet, but she didn't want it. Her stomach was twisted. She stared out the window again, a habit now, watching clouds slide past like slow thoughts. Her hands were fidgeting with the edge of her blanket, tugging, folding, unfolding. She kept playing the moment over again. What did I do wrong? She didn't talk back, didn't make a scene, didn't kick or shout like other kids might have. And still, she was the one who got slapped. The seatbelt sign chimed on. A small bump of turbulence shook the plane. The man in 2C looked up and reached instinctively for his belt. Eden froze. Not from fear, from uncertainty. She had to go to the bathroom. But the last time she stood up, Candace nearly yanked her by the arm. That memory still sat deep in her shoulder. She hesitated, then reached for the call button. Nothing happened. She waited. A minute, then 2. Still no one came. So, very quietly, she unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. She only made it 2 steps into the aisle before Candace reappeared like a shadow. "Where do you think you're going?" Her voice was a cold whisper. The kind meant to sound polite to everyone else, but hit hard to the person it was meant for. Eden opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She motioned toward the restroom. The seatbelt sign is on. Eden looked up at the glowing light, confused. It had just come on. Candace leaned in. "Didn't your parents ever teach you manners?" That word, parents, hit like a slap. Eden flinched. Back home in Cambridge, people still called her the little genius with the dead mom. They didn't say it out loud, but Eden could feel it. She was the quiet girl, the odd one, the one who didn't belong in group projects, the one who needed special space. Candace's tone wasn't new. It just hit harder at 36. 1,000 feet. "Get back to your seat," Candace ordered. "You'll wait like everyone else." Eden slowly turned around, but her eyes caught Walker's. He was standing at the galley, holding a cup of tea for another passenger. His brow furrowed. He saw. Candace followed Eden down the aisle, hovering behind her like a shadow. As soon as Eden sat down, Candace leaned in again. "You think you're special because you're up here?" Eden didn't respond. "You people always think rules don't apply." There it was. You people. Eden didn't know exactly what that meant, but she knew how it felt. Like acid in her chest. Walker stepped forward. "Everything all right here?" Candace straightened, her smile automatic. "Just helping the young lady get settled," she said, falsely sweet. Eden stared straight ahead. Walker looked at her. "Miss Monroe, do you need anything?" Candace cut in. "She's fine. We've been taking good care of her." Eden finally spoke. One word. Soft. Barely audible. "No." Walker hesitated. But Candace was already retreating. Her expression neutral, but her posture stiff. Back in the galley, Walker pulled the purser aside. "We've got a problem," he said quietly. "What kind?" "Passenger 2A. She's been mistreated. Badly. Ignored. Slapped. I think it's racial." The purser's eyes narrowed. "Did you witness the slap?" "No," Walker said. "But I saw the aftermath. Her cheek. Her behavior. It was real." The purser nodded. "I'll inform the captain." Meanwhile, Eden sat frozen. Her hands were clenched into small fists in her lap. Kismet was tucked between her hip and the armrest. Her headphones were still on, but they didn't mute the memories. 2 years earlier, Eden stood backstage at a science fair. Her mother had just presented a prototype of NeuroAir Light, a wearable device that translated small hand motions and facial expressions into flight attendant notifications. "Passengers like Eden," she'd said proudly, "often don't use words to speak. But that doesn't mean they don't communicate." People clapped politely, but afterward, someone in the hallway muttered, "Seems like a lot of tech for a kid who doesn't even say thank you." Her mother had pulled her close and whispered, "You don't owe the world noise. You owe it your truth." Back in seat 2A, Eden reached into her bag. She pulled out her mother's audio recorder. She clicked it on. The screen blinked softly. Old files scrolled across. NeuroAir presentation. Faye Ethics Draft 2. Ariel last voice. She selected one and pressed play. Volume low. Her mother's voice filled her ears. Warm, confident, familiar. "We don't build systems for how people should behave. We build them for how people actually exist." In the cockpit, the captain received the second message from FAA. Flag level 3 remains active. Override access verified. Passenger Eden Monroe. NeuroAir core system responding. Prepare for onboard review. The captain turned to his co-pilot. Contact FAA Ethics Control. We've got a live case. Back in first class. The man in 2C stood up. He approached Eden slowly and crouched beside her seat. "I don't mean to intrude," he said, voice gentle, "but I saw some of it, and I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner." Eden didn't look at him, but she nodded, just once. That was enough. He stood and turned to the aisle. "Excuse me. Flight attendant," he called. "Could I speak to the purser?" Candace stiffened. Something was happening now. She could feel it. And for the first time in years, she realized she wasn't the one in control anymore. The sky outside was endless, a soft blanket of deep blue, occasionally broken by wisps of cloud. But inside the aircraft, tension was climbing like altitude in a thunderstorm. Flight 782 cruised at 37,000 feet. But it wasn't cruising smoothly anymore. The slap, that single, sharp moment that had passed in just a second, was now echoing through federal systems, automated ethics protocols, and the minds of 5 different people on board. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds read the new message on his screen for the 3rd time. Flag Level 3 ethics breach confirmed. Override user verified. Monroe, Eden, NeuroAir core system active. FAA Emergency Ethics Council has been alerted. He rubbed his forehead. This wasn't some passenger complaint. This was federal. He leaned over to First Officer Brenner. Get me Washington Tower. Priority code. Gray echo. Brenner raised an eyebrow. That bad? Reynolds didn't answer. He was already toggling the private channel. In first class. Eden hadn't moved. She sat small and quiet in seat 2A, her oversized hoodie hiding her shoulders, Kismet tucked tight to her ribs. But something around her had changed. People were watching now. Passengers who had ignored her earlier were whispering, glancing, and not just at her, at Candace, at the woman who slapped the child and hadn't even said sorry. The man in 2C was the first to stand again. I want to formally file a report, he said, loud enough for 3 rows to hear. What happened earlier wasn't just rude. It was abusive, and I won't stay silent about it. Candace flinched like she'd been hit. The purser arrived at his seat quickly. Sir, we take all reports seriously. She hit her. The man insisted, pointing to Eden. I saw the red mark. Everyone did. And you all just pretended it didn't happen. Other passengers nodded, subtly at first. A woman in 3A murmured, it was awful. A man in 1B added, I thought someone would do something. Walker, the flight attendant who had been silently keeping score since takeoff, stepped forward. I already reported the incident, he said. To the purser and internally, Candace's voice cracked. That's not what happened. No, the man in 2C snapped. Then explain the slap, explain the tone. Explain why you haven't checked on her once since it happened. Candace opened her mouth, but nothing came out, because the truth was she couldn't explain it. Not in a way that would make her look human again. In seat 2A, Eden said nothing. She didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't even look at her unexpected defenders. But her fingers gripped Kismet a little tighter, and in the space beneath her hoodie, the NeuroAir patch near her collarbone blinked once, picking up biometric data, triggering encrypted signals, quietly syncing with the onboard network. Her mother had designed it to speak when you're tired of speaking, down in the underbelly of the system. Inside a secure FA ethics node in Virginia, a flashing alert began to pulse. 3 administrators huddled over the screen. Live signal. Eden Monroe, NeuroAir Alpha Override. Flight 782, SKG Air. Status. Ethical incident in progress. Passenger underage, plus disabled flag. Authorization. Emergency monitoring allowed. Who the hell is Eden Monroe? One of them whispered. Another typed furiously, then froze. Oh my God, she breathed. She's Dr. Ariel Monroe's daughter. Back on the plane, the captain's voice came over the cabin speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed to maintain current altitude. There may be a short delay in our descent as we adjust coordination with ATC. It sounded routine, but it wasn't. Walker looked at the purser. He's stalling. Something's coming down. From who? FAA. Candace, meanwhile, was unraveling. In the galley, she fumbled through service cards, trying to look busy, but her hands shook. She kept checking the tablet, the one crew used to manage passenger manifests and notes. A red dot had appeared next to seat 2A. It blinked once, then again. She tapped it. Override pending. Do not interfere. Passenger verified. Monroe. Eden. Ethics review team notified. Candace dropped the tablet. Her breath caught in her throat. That name, Monroe, rang a bell. Not from this flight, from a seminar last year. A training video. A woman in a blazer presenting at the Global Passenger Ethics Summit. We believe in dignity before policy, and we are building a system where the silent can speak with power. abductee, Ariel Monroe. And now, her daughter was here, in 2A, and Candace had hit her. The purser's earpiece clicked. She pressed it close, then nodded once and turned to Candace. I need you to come with me. What?
Why?
The FAA Ethics Council has requested a formal mid-flight statement from you. You're being investigated. Candace's face drained of color. That's not even legal. They have override authority now. You know that, and the incident is classified as ethical level 3 with minor harm. If you refuse, the consequences are higher. Passengers watched as Candace was escorted toward the crew station. Walker moved toward Eden's row. He crouched gently beside her. Miss Monroe, he said softly. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Eden didn't speak, but she looked at him, just for a second, and that was enough. In the cockpit, another message pinged. Emergency mid-flight review activated. FAA legal rep will meet aircraft upon landing. Interview Eden Monroe with parental proxy. SKG Airlines executive compliance team notified. Security hold recommended on involved crew. Captain Reynolds leaned back in his seat. He'd been flying for 22 years. But this was new. 2,000 miles away, in Boston, a secure call reached an encrypted line. It rang twice. A male voice answered, calm and cold. You've reached Marcus Monroe. Sir, this is FAA Ethics Response Team. We are currently conducting a mid-air review involving your daughter, Eden Monroe. Do you authorize active executive override? The voice didn't hesitate. Yes. Activate full authority. I want the crew suspended, and when that plane lands, I want everyone in that room. Eden closed her eyes. Her mother once told her, people will always think silence means weakness, until one day, it stops their entire world. When Flight 782 touched down at JFK, the usual rush of brakes and reverse thrusters was drowned out by something much quieter. Expectation. Not a single person in first class stood up when the seatbelt sign went off. They were waiting, not for luggage, but for the moment. Walker stood by the galley, hands clasped tightly behind his back. He hadn't spoken to Candace since the FAA alert came through. She had spent the last hour sitting alone, pale and jittery, staring at the closed curtain that separated her from the rest of the cabin. In 2A, Eden remained still, calm, but her silence had shifted from passive to powerful. The flight purser made the final announcement, but it came with a twist. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Federal investigators will be boarding shortly for an active ethics review. The words sliced the atmosphere like a wire. In 2C, the businessman who had defended Eden earlier leaned forward just enough to whisper, "Good." 2 agents in navy jackets boarded first. 1 male, 1 female. No weapons, no rush. Just cold eyes and folders in hand. They moved with the kind of assurance that made even the most self-important executive shrink. Behind them came a woman in a sharp gray pantsuit. A badge hung from her neck. FAA Ethics Division, Lead Counsel. She walked straight to Eden. Miss Monroe, she asked gently. Eden looked up. My name is Jasmine Calloway. I'm with the FAA's Passenger Ethics Council. You have the right to a parent or legal proxy during questioning. Your father has already arrived at the executive terminal and will join us shortly. Walker blinked. Already arrived? How? Outside, on the tarmac. A private jet with a gold M on the tail had landed 10 minutes earlier. Marcus Monroe stood at the foot of the stairs, trench coat billowing behind him, eyes locked on the commercial aircraft. He didn't need an introduction. Everyone on the tarmac recognized him. The founder of Monroe Systems, architect of the NeuroAir Corps, the man whose software governed 31% of FA operations, and more importantly, Eden's father. Inside, Eden was escorted off the plane first. Flanked by Calloway and the 2 agents, passengers watched in stunned silence. Some took out their phones, unsure if they should record. Others just stared, guilt blooming on their faces. They hadn't said anything when it mattered. Now, they were realizing who they had stayed quiet for. In the executive holding lounge, Eden sat beside her father. Her legs didn't reach the floor, but her presence filled the room. Marcus didn't ask her if she was okay. He already knew the answer by how tightly she held Kismet. Across from them, Jasmine Calloway began the session. We're here to document the incident that took place on board Flight 782. Per FAA protocol, All recordings and sensor data from the aircraft have been synced with NeuroAir core. However, we'd like to begin with Eden's account, if she's willing. Eden said nothing. Marcus leaned forward. She prefers to communicate through her NeuroLink interface. Calloway nodded. Understood. Eden touched the hidden panel sewn into her sleeve. The lights on her wrist blinked twice. A soft chime. Then, a voice. Her mother's voice, or at least a synthesized version Eden had programmed. I was seated in 2A. I had a valid ticket. I was alone. The flight attendant approached. She yelled. Then she hit me. I did not speak. Because I wasn't raised to fight noise with noise. I was raised to listen. And when I listened, the world always told on itself. The room went still. Calloway cleared her throat, visibly shaken. We've reviewed preliminary sensor data. The force of the impact registered clearly on the cabin mic array. We also have visual confirmation. She slid a printed still across the table. It showed Candace's hand mid-swing, Eden's cheek, and a few stunned faces around them. Marcus didn't look at the photo. He only said, "Proceed." Outside, 2 more agents were quietly interviewing Walker near the crew terminal. She didn't say anything. Walker explained. Not a word. And that's what made Candace more hostile. Like she couldn't stand not having control. He hesitated. Look, we've had bad apples before, but I've never seen someone hit a child and act like it was just enforcing protocol. Back inside, Calloway switched tones. Mr. Monroe, your daughter activated a level 3 override, the first ever triggered mid-flight without adult confirmation. Per Federal Aviation Code, that requires senior executive clearance. You were listed as primary override guardian. Do you confirm her use was valid? Marcus replied without flinching. Yes. She used it exactly as intended. To report harm, to request safety, to stay silent without being ignored. Calloway took a breath. She knew this moment wasn't just about paperwork, it was about precedent. This case, she said slowly, will trigger a full ethics audit of SKG Airlines. As of now, the crew members involved are suspended pending investigation, and the FAA will recommend immediate adoption of the passenger dignity protocol across all domestic flights. Marcus stood. If they refuse, Calloway didn't blink. They lose FAA clearance on all federal routes. An hour later, a press alert went out. Breaking. FAA opens investigation into in-flight child assault. Minor identified as daughter of Marcus Monroe. Airline faces full ethics audit and potential route suspensions. At SKG Airlines HQ, panic erupted. Emails flew. Executives scrambled. Stock alerts buzzed. Legal teams huddled. And at the center of it all, a still photo of Eden, seated quietly in 2A, just before the slap. The image was spreading online, becoming a symbol. Let her sit. Silent, not small. Eden did not deserve this. Back at JFK, Eden and her father walked to the car together. Do you want to go home? He asked. Eden shook her head once, then pulled out her phone. She typed something. He read the screen. Let's stay. Let them see me. Marcus smiled, proud, protective, and fully aware that the world wasn't ready for the storm his silent daughter had just unleashed. The next morning, Eden Monroe's name was everywhere. Not because she said anything, but because she didn't. On every major news channel, the headline ran across the screen like breaking glass. FAA opens investigation after black girl struck by crew, daughter of system architect Marcus Monroe. The story caught fire not because it was rare, but because it was visible. The slap, the silence, the override. It was all captured, verified. Now, broadcast. By 9 May, a montage was playing on Good Morning America. The image of Eden sitting silently in 2A, the FAA team boarding the plane. Marcus Monroe stepping off the jet in his black coat like a man bringing winter with him. At SKG Airlines headquarters, the CEO was already in crisis mode. Pull the crew manifest. Suspend everyone involved. Do not issue statements until legal clears it. His legal chief pushed back. You can't avoid the press forever. We won't need to avoid them. He snapped. We'll pivot. Say we support the ethics review. But the FAA just escalated it to federal review. It's now a Class A ethics breach. 7 agencies are asking for comment. He paused. What? Marcus Monroe isn't just her father. the legal chief added. He also co-authored the Passenger Ethics Enforcement Clause, used to freeze funding for non-compliant airlines. The CEO's face dropped. Jesus. Yeah. And Eden activated that clause without speaking a word. Meanwhile, Eden was in her pajamas, curled up on the couch beside her father, watching the news quietly. The world had started talking, but she hadn't said a single thing. Marcus's phone buzzed. He picked it up, skimmed the message, and handed it to Eden. From FA Ethics Office. Subject: Implementation Draft Review. Attached: Monroe Protocol. Passenger rights for minors and silent reporting standards. We'd like Eden's biometric patch specs added to Federal Standard Pilot. Also, can she co-sign the final protocol language? Eden blinked. She typed back on her tablet. Yes, but remove my name from the title. It's not just about me. 3 hours later, the FAA issued a statement, effective immediately. The FAA will introduce the Monroe Protocol. All passengers under 18 shall have access to silent reporting wearable tech. Any recorded incident involving minors triggers auto review at level 2. Airlines must respond to passive ethics alerts within 5 minutes or face fines. This rule will go into effect in partnership with Monroe Systems, NeuroAir Corps, and the Passenger Dignity Coalition. At SKG's press conference that evening, the CEO stood stiffly behind the podium. He opened with a carefully written line. We sincerely apologize for the unacceptable incident aboard Flight 782 involving Miss Eden Monroe. But the press wasn't there for apologies. They wanted accountability. A woman from MSNBC raised her hand. Why did your airline fail to de-escalate an altercation involving a minor with a visible disability? He stammered. We are currently reviewing. Another reporter jumped in. Why wasn't the crew trained on the NeuroAir silent reporting system when it's been available for 2 years? A pause. We were updating procedures. Someone else shouted from the back. Or were you avoiding the cost of implementing safety standards because most silent report users are black or disabled children? The CEO's silence said enough. Meanwhile, Eden's photo had been pinned to thousands of profiles across the country. Mothers, advocates, educators, veterans. It wasn't just about race or disability or class. It was about dignity, about being struck and refusing to strike back. A week later, Eden was invited to speak at a closed-date session of the Senate Aviation Oversight Committee. She didn't want to go. So Marcus made a different plan. He set up a secure live stream interface in their study. No podiums, no cameras, just Eden at home. When it was her turn to speak, the room went quiet. Her mother's synthesized voice played again. I didn't ask for attention, I asked for safety. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the system. I didn't hit back. But I did press report. Whoa. I am not brave. I'm just tired of watching kids like me get hurt and be told to smile through it. Senator Vargas blinked away a tear. Miss Monroe, she said, voice cracking. You didn't just press report. You rewrote the whole protocol. 2 days later, the FAA Ethics Council formally passed the Passenger Silence Protection Act, unofficially dubbed the Eden Rule. It mandated every airline must integrate real-time silent reporting for youth and neurodivergent travelers. Crew members who interfere with or dismiss such reports will face individual fines and license reviews. FAA ethics monitors will receive real-time signal feeds from NeuroAir Corps, no longer requiring physical incident reports to investigate. Candace, the flight attendant who struck Eden, was placed under full investigation. Her union offered her limited legal support, but withdrew when flight logs showed prior bias complaints. Her termination came quietly, but not privately. It was printed on the front page of the Washington Chronicle. Flight attendant dismissed after striking CEO's daughter. FAA calls it watershed moment. As for Eden, she never once asked for fame, but she now had a seat on the newly formed Passenger Youth Advisory Panel. She didn't go to the first meeting. She just sent a message. When kids speak, you should listen. When they don't, you should listen harder. On her 13th birthday, Eden got a card from the FAA. Inside was a note. Thank you for teaching the system to listen when it's quiet. And beneath it, a printed quote from her original report. I wasn't raised to fight noise with noise. Outside her window that night, planes traced quiet arcs across the stars. They were flying safer now, because of her silence, because of the slap. Because, at 37,000 feet, a little girl didn't raise her voice. But she raised the bar for everyone else. The first airport to change was Atlanta. Not because it was the busiest, but because it had failed Eden twice before. Once when she was 5, a TSA officer mocked the way she didn't speak. Once at age 10, when a gate agent refused to believe she had a solo boarding pass. Neither of those moments had gone viral, but Marcus remembered them. So, when the FAA asked him where to begin deploying the new ethics architecture, he didn't hesitate. He said. Start where the system broke the earliest. It started with a single kiosk. Not the kind you print boarding passes from, but one with a quiet blue glow and a single sentence on screen. Can't speak. You don't have to. Tap here. Eden watched the footage from her father's office. She didn't say anything, but she smiled, barely, in the weeks that followed. 19 more airports came online. Each one integrated the NeuroAir patch system, silent feedback pathways, and FAA ethics relay protocol. What used to take weeks of investigation could now be flagged in real time. Crew bias, verbal aggression, unjustified seat relocations. It wasn't just about Eden anymore. It was about every kid who had been told, "This isn't your seat." Every traveler told, "We'll deal with your kind after boarding." On the corporate side, pushback came hard and fast. Several mid-tier airlines tried to delay compliance, citing costs and technical limitations. They claimed the system was too sensitive. Marcus didn't respond publicly. He just uploaded a file. It contained a 42-page audit of all FAA reported incidents involving minors over the past 3 years, cross-referenced by demographic data and incident outcome. The findings: Black and brown minors were 3 times more likely to be deboarded for non-compliance. Girls with speech impairments were flagged as uncooperative nearly 10x more than boys. Not a single successful silent report had resulted in policy changes until Eden, and now they had no choice. In Washington, FAA administrators met behind closed doors. The question wasn't whether to adopt the Monroe Protocol. It was how to make it mandatory. So they did what agencies do when they're scared of backlash. They leaked the vote to the press. When the leak dropped on Politico, it made headlines instantly. FAA expected to mandate NeuroAir ethics tech for all federal aviation routes. $2. 3B compliance wave incoming. Investors took notice. Airlines panicked. Ethics suddenly became a line item on every budget spreadsheet in the industry. Back home, Eden's routine didn't change much. She still liked lemon yogurt, still preferred books over screens, still wouldn't speak in public, not because she couldn't, but because she no longer needed to. The system was speaking for her now. Marcus, however, had become the new face of ethics in transportation. He testified before the Senate Commerce Committee. He turned down offers from 3 airlines wanting to license Monroe systems exclusively. "I won't build walls with this," he said. "I built it to break them." The pressure reached a tipping point when Air Nexus, a top-tier carrier, publicly refused to implement NeuroAir, calling it an overreaction driven by media outrage. That same day, Eden posted a 4-word message to the Youth Advisory Panel's private server. "Let's run the numbers." Within 48 hours, a team of high school-age coders from the ethics lab published a real-time comparison dashboard. Number of unresolved silent reports at each airline. Percentage of complaints by route. Crew disciplinary response times. Passenger demographic parity. It was brutal. Air Nexus dropped 14 points in public trust. Within a week, they reversed course and announced full integration. And still, Eden didn't speak, because she didn't have to. Every action was a sentence. Every update to the system was a paragraph. Every airport that adopted the protocol was a full stop to an old way of flying. 3 weeks later, at JFK Terminal 4, a 9-year-old autistic boy in boarding group C was quietly trying to flag a flight attendant who ignored him. He tapped his patch twice. The alert went off at the FAA Ethics Command Center within 7 seconds. The crew member was politely pulled aside before takeoff. The boy was given noise-canceling headphones and seated early. No video, no scandal, no hashtags, just change, just how Eden wanted it. The biggest shift came on a Thursday, a closed-door session with the FAA, DOT, and representatives from 17 airlines. They were about to sign the updated Passenger Dignity Framework. the industry's new ethical backbone. But there was a problem. One of the clauses still listed the initiative as optional compliance for non-core routes. Marcus stood and tapped the document twice. No. Either this applies to every seat, or it applies to no one. A silence followed. Then someone asked, "What if we rename the clause after Eden?" He turned to his daughter, seated beside him. Eden typed 4 more words. Only if it works. The vote passed unanimously later that night, as father and daughter sat under the stars. Marcus turned to her. "You know, most people scream when they want the world to change." Eden looked up at him, lips still, then typed. "Most people aren't listened to either way." He nodded. "Do you ever wish you'd yelled back that day?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the patch. It blinked, soft blue light. Then she typed, "I didn't yell, but the world heard me anyway." And for the first time in days, Marcus exhaled like a man who finally believed the plane was leveling out. The first international flight to adopt the Monroe Protocol wasn't American. It was Canadian, West Harbor Air, a mid-sized carrier based in Vancouver, quietly reached out to Marcus Monroe 2 weeks after the FAA mandate went public. No press releases, no legal threats, no partnership proposals. Just a note from their CEO, handwritten and scanned. "We don't want to be forced into ethics. We want to lead with them. Please let Eden know." Her silence echoed here. 2. Eden read the message from her tablet while lying on her bedroom floor. She didn't smile. Exactly. But she tapped a short reply. "Tell them to remove their child restraint policy from 1998 first. Then we'll talk." By the end of the month, 4 Canadian airports had quietly integrated the NeuroAir patch system. Then Oslo followed. Then Berlin. Then, to everyone's shock, Dubai. Each time a new nation onboarded the system, Eden's dashboard updated with a soft green glow. It looked like a constellation slowly forming across the map. Meanwhile, Eden hadn't flown since the incident. Not because she was afraid, but because she was watching. The world was moving, and she wanted to make sure it moved right. But that changed when Marcus received an unexpected invitation. It came from the International Aviation Ethics Council, AEC, headquartered in Brussels. They wanted to award Eden with the inaugural Passenger Impact Award. It had never been given before. In fact, it hadn't existed before. They created it just for her. When they landed in Brussels, something had shifted. The crew didn't just nod politely at Eden. They greeted her by name, asked if she preferred aisle or window, made space without being asked. But what caught Marcus off guard was what they didn't do. No performative praise, no excessive attention, no hero treatment. Just respect, the kind that should have always been there. At the IC Summit, Eden stood at the back of the room in a gray dress and her signature headphones. She wouldn't go on stage. She wouldn't speak. She didn't need to. Instead, the chairwoman of the council read from Eden's original silent report, word for word. In front of 400 aviation executives, I didn't hit back. I hit report. I didn't want headlines. I wanted safety. You don't have to hear me to know I matter. When the applause ended, Eden didn't bow. She just tapped her patch once, and the screen behind her glowed blue. That single signal, her trademark now, was understood around the world. The system was still listening. Back in the U.S., the airline that had wronged Eden, SKG, was facing its reckoning. Over 17 ethics violations had been flagged in the month following Eden's slap. None had gone viral, but they didn't need to, because now, the ethics score mattered more than public pressure. SKG's score dropped below 4, 2, the new threshold for retaining federal support contracts. As a result, their code share with HorizonJet was suspended. 3 airports pulled premium gate access. 1 ESG fund froze 100 mighties in partnership equity. It wasn't Eden's revenge. It was the system doing what it was supposed to do. Meanwhile, Marcus began receiving invitations from ethics councils, tech conferences, and even the United Nations. But he always asked the same thing before accepting. Will Eden have a seat? If they said no, he didn't go. If they said yes, he asked what chair height they were offering her. That's when people started realizing this wasn't a PR movement. It was a structural one. One day in early spring, Marcus walked into Eden's room and found her sketching something. It wasn't a drawing, it was a floor plan. "Is that a building?" he asked. She nodded and slid it over. On top of the paper were the words, "Passenger Ethics Institute, Draft Layout." There were 4 main rooms: Silence Room, Simulation Bay, Data Visualization Gallery, Testimony Wall, each with one goal: to let passengers, especially young ones, understand their rights without ever needing to raise their voice. Marcus looked down, stunned. "You want to build this?" Eden typed. "No. I want every major airport to build their own." And they did. Within 6 months, the first prototype of Eden's design opened at JFK. By the end of the year, 5 more were in progress. People didn't go there to complain. They went to learn, to teach their kids, to report what never got seen before. And slowly, silently, Eden's vision reshaped the passenger experience. But not everyone was ready. Some CEOs resisted. One in particular, the head of Rollout, went on a podcast and said, "If a kid can ground your fleet, your airline deserves to fail." It went viral, not in the way he wanted. Eden didn't respond, but Marcus did. He wrote a single sentence on LinkedIn. "If your system breaks at a child's whisper, the problem was never the whisper." The next day, Rollout's ethics score dropped 6 points. 3 major sponsors pulled out. The CEO apologized, publicly, and stepped down quietly a week later. By the time Eden turned 13, her story had been translated into 21 languages, not because of her words, but because of her will. She didn't shout. She didn't sue. She didn't campaign. She just showed the system what it looked like when you built it to protect the wrong people. And then she rebuilt it for everyone else. On her birthday, the FAA sent her a gift. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dear Eden, because of you, 148 airports now recognize silent reports in under 10 seconds. Because of you. 1. 2 million kids will board safely this year. Because of you, we stopped asking who deserves to be heard and started listening first. Sincerely, the Passenger Rights Division." That night, Marcus asked her the same question he had after the slap. "Do you feel heard now?" Eden paused, then typed, "I don't need to be heard anymore. I just need the next girl who sits in seat 2A to never be afraid again." And in that moment, as planes crossed the night sky, a quiet girl from Oakland who never raised her voice had changed the way the world flies. The Capitol building stood quiet that morning. No protests, no cameras swarming the steps, just a light breeze cutting through the air as the Senate convened for what should have been a routine session. But it wasn't, because item 14 on the docket wasn't ordinary. It was titled the Passenger Silence Protection Act, Federal Ethics Motion 1286A, and its sponsor, Senator Carol O'Malley of Maryland, a woman who had quietly met Eden 2 weeks prior. No press, no photos, just one sentence she remembered Eden typing that day. "It wasn't that I couldn't speak. It's that no one was listening when I did." The hearing started slow, as they always do. Bureaucrats shuffled papers. Lawyers read preambles. Lobbyists leaned in from the shadows of the chamber. But the room shifted when the FAA deputy director took the mic. He opened with a stat. "Since the implementation of the Monroe Protocol, silent reporting has increased 483%, and misuse remains under 1%. That silenced a few critics. Then he added, "For the first time in aviation history, Dignity has a data trail, and it's changing everything." Across the aisle, resistance simmered. Senator Grant from Arizona raised the usual concerns. "Are we overregulating airline crew behavior? Do we risk false flags by passengers misusing tech?" But then the chairwoman responded plainly. "Senator, the system in question was created by a 12-year-old girl, a girl who asked for no spotlight, no lawsuit, no revenge, just the right not to be struck and silenced." The room fell silent, and for a few seconds, even politics stepped aside. The vote was called. Final tally: 91 in favor, 7 opposed, 2 abstained. The Passenger Silence Protection Act passed and would go into effect in 60 days. What the act did was simple on paper. Required all U.S. airlines operating domestic routes to install certified silent report systems for underage and neurodivergent passengers. Mandated a 12-hour response window for FAA ethics teams once a flag was triggered. created the Passenger Rights and Dignity Division PRD2 under the Department of Transportation. But what it represented was much deeper. A shift from let's hope someone complains loudly enough to let's build a system where they don't have to. Back in Oakland, Eden didn't celebrate. There was no parade, no school assembly. Instead, she updated the ethics dashboard. Her patch glowed once, deep blue, and a message went out to 28,000 passengers subscribed to the NeuroAir network. The system heard you. Now the law does too. Meanwhile, airline execs scrambled. The law forced even the most reluctant carriers to accelerate compliance. Airline CEO meetings that once focused on quarterly growth now opened with ethics metrics. A popular internal joke spread across the industry. We used to track miles, now we track moments. What few knew, though, was that Eden had been working quietly with a group of legal interns to draft a second wave of reform. It was called Clause 13, Passenger Override Emergency Standard. The clause would allow any verified ethics flag, submitted mid-flight by a minor or disabled passenger, to trigger an emergency hold on takeoff clearance for connecting flights. A failsafe, in case silence wasn't enough. As the 60-day mark passed, airports nationwide changed their boarding signs. Underneath the familiar Now Boarding Group A, a new banner appeared. Silent rights protected here. Federal Code 1286A. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't viral, but it meant something, especially to the ones who used to be overlooked. In Washington, Senator O'Malley received a package. No sender listed. Inside, a single note. Thank you for listening. E.M. And beneath it, a first edition NeuroAir patch, now engraved with Eden's initials. She held it in her hand for a moment, then placed it on her lapel. Later that day, while boarding a flight to Boston, the gate agent noticed. He didn't say much, just smiled and nodded. "You're one of the ones who made the sky safer," he said quietly. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Some changes don't need a speech. They just need to stick. At precisely 7:06 a.m. Eastern Time, 217 aircraft across 3 continents were grounded. No warning, no weather delays. Just a simple phrase flashing on internal dispatch screens. SkyGrid Code 13 triggered. Compliance, hold, active. Pilots sat stunned. Gate crews scrambled, and airline executives, many still asleep, were about to wake up to the one name they had hoped never to see on a red alert. Eden Monroe. It started 48 hours earlier. A whistleblower from one of the last holdout airlines, Luxavia International, uploaded an encrypted recording onto the Ethics Core cloud. In the recording, CEO Arthur Delacroix was caught on tape mocking the newly passed Passenger Silence Protection Act. You give kids that kind of power, they'll weaponize it for juice boxes and tantrums. We'll install the patch readers when the market punishes us, not a minute before. He laughed. Others in the boardroom did too. But Eden didn't. She didn't speak, didn't post, didn't even write a memo. She uploaded the recording to SkyGrid, then flagged Luxavia under Code 13, Emergency Override Protocol. The effect, immediate, by sunrise, 71. Connecting flights operated by Luxavia and its affiliate lines had been held in queue. 8 airports suspended Luxavia's priority runway access. 6 international terminals denied boarding for incoming flights. 3 major booking platforms issued an automatic compliance freeze. ESG investors panicked, pulling out $2.3 billion in funding within hours. Arthur Delacroix tried to reach Eden through back channels. He got no reply. She wasn't interested in negotiation. She had already moved on to something larger. That same morning, the International Aviation Ethics Council, IAEC, convened an emergency summit. For the first time, a child would address the chamber, not with a speech, but with emotion. All airlines operating in North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific must adopt Eden's rule within 30 days to maintain ethics certification. The rule was simple but uncompromising. Mandatory silent reporting systems on all commercial aircraft. 10-second acknowledgement protocol by crew or automated interface. Real-time passenger flag access for minors, elderly, neurodivergent, and nonverbal individuals. Transparent post-flight review board, co-chaired by civil society members, including at least one youth advocate. Failure to comply, SkyGrid suspension. FAA grounding, And, in Eden's words, you lose the right to fly. Arthur Delacroix's team flew him to Washington, where he requested to address Congress in a private hearing. The room was tense. He entered in a Navy suit, visibly rattled but still trying to maintain control. He opened his folder, ready to speak, but Eden beat him to it. She didn't use words. She played the clip. His own voice echoed across the chamber. They'll weaponize it for juice boxes and tantrums. Dead silence followed. Then Eden slowly placed her NeuroAir patch on the desk, right in front of him. Arthur stared down at it, then up at her. For the first time in his career, he had no script, no defense, no power, and no option but to say the words, "I was wrong. Eden, I'm sorry. I see now what you built, and why we failed to protect it." The moment was live-streamed by 4 major networks. By nightfall, hashtags like Eden knelt the sky, Rule 13, and Not Afraid to Report were trending globally. But Eden didn't stay for the applause. She left the chamber and walked out into the soft spring air. Reporters swarmed. A girl with a mic shouted, "How does it feel to finally win?" Eden turned, paused, then typed, "It's not about winning. It's about making sure the next girl doesn't have to fight." 30 days later, the last airline signed the compliance charter. Luxavia, humbled and now under new leadership, issued an apology campaign that aired in 19 countries. Their new tagline, "If she can fly safely, so can you?" Every airport in the G7 now featured Eden access zones, quiet booths for passenger feedback, real-time reporting, and education. But more than that, something changed in the air. Cabin crew started behaving differently, not just to avoid punishment, but because something had shifted. Training manuals were rewritten. Behavioral metrics became as important as flight time. Passenger dignity became a measurable KPI. And on one particular flight from LAX to Seoul, a mother watched as her autistic son signaled for help using Eden's patch. The flight attendant knelt beside him, calmly reading the alert. She didn't ask him to calm down. She didn't say he's just sensitive. She looked him in the eyes and said, "We see you. We've got this." And for the first time in years, the mother wept, not from fear, but relief. By year's end, Eden Monroe had received no fewer than 9 international honors. She declined most of them, except one, the Order of Civil Dignity, awarded by a coalition of 42 nations. The medal was plain, just a blue enamel circle, but the citation read, "For the passenger who did not shout, but whose silence redefined the sky." Marcus Monroe stood backstage at the ceremony, watching his daughter from the shadows. She didn't want to go up, didn't want to speak, didn't want a standing ovation, so instead, the council made a different offer. They made her co-chair of the Global Passenger Ethics Board, age restrictions waived. 1 year later, every major airline in the world had adopted Eden's rule, and in aviation textbooks across dozens of languages, a new chapter appeared, the day the industry knelt. In her room back in Oakland, Eden placed her medal beside the original NeuroAir patch. She looked at both, then at the sky outside her window, and typed her final entry of the year into the system log. "When they struck me, I didn't strike back. I coded forward, and now, the sky listens." It started in Gate 47C at Heathrow. A young Korean boy named Jay, 9 years old, traveling alone to visit his grandmother in Boston, fluent in code, but rarely spoke out loud in English. He wore the standard NeuroAir patch, bright blue with Eden's initials embroidered near the bottom. While waiting to board, a gate agent made a joke, loud enough for others to hear. "He's got one of those tattletale patches. Better not bump into him or I'll be grounded." Some laughed. Jay didn't. He quietly activated his patch and submitted a report. But nothing happened. No acknowledgement. No alert. No ethics flag. The system stayed silent, just like before. 12 hours later, Eden got the message. Not from Jay, but from a coder in Berlin who noticed an abnormal delay in the SkyGrid ping loop. A critical anomaly. A vulnerability had been exploited. Someone, somewhere, had written code that filtered out reports from specific routes, airlines, and patch IDs. It didn't delete the reports, it buried them. By the time Eden's team confirmed the breach, 31 silent reports had failed to trigger, some as old as 4 days. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then typed 3 words. "We've been compromised." The reaction was swift. FAA issued a precautionary warning. The Global Ethics Board convened overnight, and the term sky grid ghosting entered the public lexicon. The industry had done what it always did, rebranded a crisis like a software bug. But Eden knew better. This wasn't a glitch. It was sabotage. What stung the most wasn't the breach. It was who was behind it. A tech firm called Virion Dynamics had sold AI compliance modules to second-tier airlines, unwilling to adopt Eden's full open-source protocol. Instead of Eden's ethics-first code, they used predictive passenger filters. The system learned what kinds of reports were likely valid and quietly discarded the rest. It was bias in a box, and it was spreading. Eden faced a choice: patch the leak, or burn it all down and rebuild. She didn't hesitate. That night, she pulled the override switch on all AI modules using non-certified filters. Within minutes, 62 routes were suspended globally. Airlines cried foul. Executives threatened lawsuits. But Eden responded with a line they would never forget. "I gave you the power to listen. If you use it to silence, I'll take the sky back." As the patch rolled out, airports began to stabilize. Reports started flowing again. Jay's was the first recovered, and marked with a bright green tag that simply read, "Resolved, with dignity." Back in her room, Eden stared at the SkyGrid dashboard. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. Instead, she whispered something to herself, something only she could hear. Even systems built for silence must be ready to scream. The email arrived quietly at 3:47 a.m. No subject line, no fanfare, just 2 sentences. "This system was built to outlive me. The sky belongs to you now." It was from Eden, sent to the ethics board, copied to 193 regulatory bodies, and signed with her official exit protocol, Legacy Clause 01E. By dawn, the aviation world was on edge. Was Eden stepping down? Was she sick? Threatened? Broken? None of the above. She was finished. 12 hours later, Eden released a short video. She didn't appear in it. Instead, it showed silent footage of passengers boarding planes, an elderly woman guided gently to her seat, a nonverbal child using the patch to ask for water, a young boy reporting a rude comment, and the crew responding with a calm, respectful nod. No narration, just one closing message. If dignity can be taught, it can also be inherited. That was it. Eden Monroe, 13 years old, had done what no regulator, CEO, or senator could. She built something that didn't just punish injustice, it predicted and prevented it. And now she was handing it over. The Legacy Clause was a protocol she wrote when she was 11. It included a real-time ethics council made up of youth and adult co-chairs, an immutable oversight blockchain for every flagged incident, and most shockingly, a self-lock mechanism if future execs tried to corrupt the codebase. In short, Eden made herself obsolete. The final scene came at a press conference held in Oakland. Reporters gathered, cameras aimed, but the stage remained empty. Then the screen flickered to life. A text appeared. "This isn't my goodbye. This is your welcome. Lead like the sky is watching." Then it cut to black. Just the SkyGrid emblem floating quietly on screen. 2 weeks later, the system ran its first full cycle without Eden. Nothing failed. In fact, reports increased. New crew protocols launched. Ethics compliance hit an all-time high, and airlines began publishing their dignity scores publicly, unprompted. Something had shifted, not just in the software, but in the soul of the system. Marcus Monroe, watching from the back of a conference room in D.C., whispered to himself, "She did it. She built something they can't silence." In the months that followed, people began referring to the global protocol by a new name. They stopped calling it SkyGrid and started calling it what it really was: Eden's Sky. Somewhere in Oakland, Eden Monroe logged off her terminal. She placed her NeuroAir patch in a small box and slid it into a drawer. Outside, a plane passed overhead. She looked up, smiled, and whispered, "It listens now. If this story moved you the way it moved us, tell us where you're watching from and what your sky looks like today." Meanwhile, Celeste convened her core team in Cambridge one crisp morning. They sat around the exposed brick conference table, cups of coffee steaming. A map on the screen showed NIBE's coverage, 38 states in green, 12 more highlighted in yellow, scheduled for rollout next year. "We're going from coast to coast," she said. "By Q3, NIBES will be in every major banking hub." Her data architect nodded. "We've already set up servers in Dallas, Atlanta, and Denver. The cloud instances can handle triple the load." Celeste tapped her pen on the table. "Good. Next, community credit unions. Let them plug in the Monroe threshold, too." In Atlanta, Peachtree Mutual Credit Union became the first rural-focused institution to adopt the threshold. Its president, a retired Air Force colonel, explained in a regional finance blog, "We learned that dignity isn't a luxury. It's the foundation of trust. Thanks to NIBES, our members know we respect them as individuals." Back in New York, Regulatory Watch, a respected industry newsletter, ran a cover story, "The Silent Revolution: How One Woman's Ethics Protocol Transformed Banking Culture." They interviewed 3 bank CEOs, none of whom mentioned Celeste by name. Instead, they spoke of the framework and the ledger, praising the clarity and enforceability of Monroe's protocols. No one called her a hero. No one called for parades. Instead, they said, "We saw a need. Celeste Monroe built a solution, and that solution was working." That week, Celeste received an email from Marietta Savings and Loan in Ohio. Its CEO wrote, "I want to personally thank you. After we integrated the ethics dashboard, our customer satisfaction scores rose 14%. More importantly, our staff report feeling proud again, like they're doing the right thing." Celeste forwarded the email to her team with one sentence, "This is why we do it." In Washington, D.C., Senator Blake introduced a new amendment adding NIBES compliance metrics to the Financial Institutions Fairness Act. At the hearing, Blake said, "Ethics can no longer be aspirational. It must be measurable. The Monroe framework proved that." Applause rang out, muted but genuine. Meanwhile, Belmont Trust had become a case study in corporate ethics courses at Wharton and Harvard Business School. Professors assigned analyses of their turnaround, how a silent freeze led to structural reform. Students debated lines like, "An apology without actions is just noise." They wrote papers on the Monroe Ledger's design principles and the way the threshold forced everyday reflection. In Cambridge, Celeste stood by her window, looking out at the Charles River at dusk. Her assistant, Ramon, handed her a tablet. "Your speaking notes for tomorrow at the American Bankers Association Summit." She glanced at the agenda. Panel, Embedding Ethical Protocols into Core Banking Systems. She smiled softly, not because she craved the stage, but because it was time to move from policy to practice. That night, she stepped into a small conference hall in downtown Boston. The audience filled the seats. Community bankers, credit union managers, policy wonks, even some Harvard MBAs. No TV cameras, no flashing lights, just people who cared. She walked to the podium, paused. "Good evening," she said quietly. "You don't need me to tell you why we're here. You're living it every day. The question now is, how deep will you go? How will you use these protocols to transform not just compliance, but culture?" Heads nodded. The room shifted forward, lean in, hungry. And with that, Celeste Monroe's work spoke louder than any speech. The morning sun filtered through the glass walls of the Raleigh Center Hotel ballroom, catching the crystal chandeliers and polished hardwood floors in a warm glow. Rows of chairs were filled with entrepreneurs, bankers, civic leaders, each there to hear Celeste Monroe, though most didn't know exactly what to expect. Celeste stepped onto the stage. No fanfare, no music, just her, slender silhouette framed by the light. She paused, letting the room settle, then spoke without a greeting. "I won't recount what happened. You've heard the stories." A gentle murmur rippled through the audience. She let it fade, then asked, "How would our world change if we trusted someone the moment they told us who they are?" Silence. You could feel it mid-air, a question so simple it cut through every assumption. Eyes locked on her. Some recognized the gravity. Others leaned forward, uncertainty and curiosity mixing in their expressions. "Trust isn't earned in boardroom optics," she continued. It's granted at first sight and either honored or shattered by our actions. She paced slowly, as if walking through their minds. A name, an identity, a life story, those shouldn't be invoices we bill against someone's worth. Heads nodded, some in agreement, others in sober reflection. Behind her, on a screen, brief bullet points appeared. Trust metrics,